So I wanted to give my thoughts on the WBA light welterweight championship fight between Ricky Burns and Kiryl Relikh. I mean, it was a good fight, but I do think that it was more like a draw as opposed to the clear decision that the judges had it for Burns. To me, I mean, I scored it a draw. I thought that Relikh probably could have gotten a knockdown counted in the final round. It looked like Burns went down from punches, regardless of that last kind of cuffing shot to the back of the head being the thing that happened just before Burns' touchdown. But I mean, I thought that Relikh was hurting him, and I thought that that was a clear case of being dropped from an accumulation of the combination that Relikh had thrown. Um, but incidentally, Burns wound up getting the decision. Relikh started off really well. First 3 rounds, pretty much, he was cutting off the ring really well, controlling the distance, controlling the pace of the fight. I thought the commentators were correct in saying that it looked like Relikh was the champion in the early rounds. Like he took control of the ring, like he was the ring general. He was controlling the pace of the fight, like everything was being fought the way he would want the fight to go. It wasn't until the middle rounds really where Burns started to really catch on and basically make Relikh pay, I guess, for his overall, I guess you might say instability, like just the instability of his style. He's very much an improvisational type fighter, a guy that just kind of does, like, goes with the fly. He's moving, he's going back and forth, switching stances constantly. Almost like a Terrence Crawford or like a Dimitri Piro. He's just moving like all over the place at all times. But in spite of the fact that that was working really well for him early on, as it got into the middle rounds, it became a little bit more predictable. His herky jerkiness wasn't as random, and it was a little bit easier for Burns to time. And Burns was timing it pretty well. He was going to the body fairly well, and he was able to catch Relikh almost coming straight in. Relikh had almost avoid. He was using a little bit too much torso movement with a little too little foot movement as it got into the middle rounds. Whereas in the beginning and the end of the fight, he was using a lot of foot movement and a lot of torso and head movement. It became just primarily torso movement without a whole lot of lateral foot movement. And that's where he really wound up paying the price, because of the fact that there were a lot of times where eventually he would have to make his body go back into like a vertical position, and that's where Burns was able to time him, catch him, scoot off to the side, and basically force him to kind of reset. So it's almost like he was becoming the mobile fighter all of a sudden, as opposed to Relikh. Eventually, though, Relikh started getting back into the fight. I'd say pretty much like round 9 and round 10. Started to reset that tempo the way he had done so early in the fight. And I thought he definitely controlled the championship round. So to me, if there was anybody that really deserved to win in what I saw as a drawish type fight, I thought it was Kiryl Relikh. And so I'm not surprised, and and I don't blame the likes of Ricky Hatton and a lot of the fans that think that Relikh got robbed, just by virtue of the fact that, in spite of the fact that it wasn't really a robbery, it was a close fight. The fact that the scores were so lopsided, kind of, it lends the credence to that type of a call. But regardless, now Ricky Burns is, he's defended his title against the #1 contender. It's looking like the next possibility is going to be Adrian Broner, possibly in Las Vegas sometime. I'm guessing early next year. That's what everybody's pretty much talking about. Like everybody was talking about it going into this fight, and coming out of the fight, of course, the calls for that have not stopped. And it's a fight that's definitely a few years in the making. I mean, back when Broner um, was an undefeated, young contender and champion, and when Burns was champion as well, both at 130 and then 135 previously. Of course, both of them had a couple of ups and downs since then, and they're both, kind of in a similar way now. They're in a similar portion of their careers, where they're both not necessarily like the best of the best, but they're also not necessarily just easy walkovers. Especially Broner. On any given night, it's he's this very up and down type of inconsistent fighter. Sometimes he looks fantastic, sometimes not so much. Um, and when it comes to him versus Burns, I think a lot of that will play into how the fight goes, because I think that the way that he fought in the Emmanuel Taylor fight, I think that Burns stands a damn good shot against him. But the way that he fought in the Alec Verdiev fight, I think that Broner, probably does a pretty good number on Burns. It's an interesting fight though. I mean, regardless of how it goes, regardless of how it turns out, the interesting the real wild card I would say is Broner. Burns, you pretty much know what you're gonna get almost every time out. He's at least consistent in his ability and his style and everything. With Broner, it's a lot more chaotic. He's a wild card. Sometimes, he'll be a little bit mobile. Sometimes his head movement a little bit more, be a bit more on point. His defense will be a bit more on point. His offense, in terms of combinations, throwing combinations, because when he throws combinations, it's really tough for very many fighters to really match the ability that he has with his hands in terms of just putting together just nasty, just snappy type combos. But it's a matter of him being able to do that and him dedicating himself to that type of a game plan. Because when he throws single shots, he's just not as effective. Not in the least, really. But it's an interesting fight to come about. It's a tough break for Relikh, of course. This was a big break for him. It would have been a big deal had he managed to win. But unfortunately, he just came up short. Kind of reminds me a little bit of the Richard Commey versus Robert Easter fight, where Commey gave Easter absolute hell, but just wasn't to be for him in spite of the fact that, he very well could have won the fight, and a lot of people thought that he did. But for Relikh, I'm sure that he'll get another title opportunity somewhere in the future, and I think he's a fighter that, if he's able to work out his game plan a little bit better, maybe his stamina. I imagine it might have been a possible stamina issue. If he's able to fight like he did in the early rounds and in the championship rounds, the entire fight, as opposed to kind of gassing a little bit and his style breaking down a little bit in the mid rounds, he's a tough son of a bitch to be reckoned with, man. He's gonna be a difficult fight for just about anybody out there at 140 or even 147. It'd be interesting to see if he could get some fights with these other guys that aren't necessarily big names, that don't come from like big time like fan base backgrounds or anything too. There's Francis Barthélemy out there. You got Felix Diaz out there. I think a fight between him and either of them would be fantastic. Especially considering the fact that they're all kind of in the same boat with regards to the fact that they're kind of high risk, low reward type of opponents. And maybe one of them, by beating the others, for instance, could really make themselves into a major commodity in terms of being able to get fan demand up for some of these other bigger star fighters to face off against them. But getting back to Burns, though, I'd imagine that the Burns-Broner fight is probably going to come off. I mean, it doesn't seem like there really would be anything standing in the way of it. I mean, outside of some of the potential financial issues that are rumored to be going around, on Broner's side of things. But who knows? It'll be interesting to see if they manage to pull it off. It'll be interesting to see if they actually even have it in Scotland. It wouldn't surprise me. Even though it looks like they're talking about having it in Las Vegas in December, which would be a pretty quick turnaround. Pretty interesting fight if they manage to get it made that soon. So Burns would definitely be ready, but will Broner? That's the key question. Although I guess it's been at least a little bit of time since he got hemmed up in that whole case with the movie theater and everything. So, or was it a movie theater? No, it was a bowling alley, I think. Right? I don't know. I can't even remember exactly what it was that happened to Broner. He's allegedly, scuffed up some dude, but it is what it is. It'll be definitely interesting to see Broner back in the ring again, as long as it's able to come off. And I think that Burns is very much a suitable opponent. It'll be an interesting fight. And I think, it's a fun fight. It's pretty much always a fun fight whenever Adrian Broner's in the ring, for the most part. The only fight really that was the only dull fights I guess you could really talk about with regards to Broner in recent years was probably the John Molina fight. The John Molina fight where he was able to just kind of keep him at a distance. He boxed very safe. He used the kind of better safe than sorry. Look good next time type of approach to John Molina, which I don't blame him for, because Molina is a hell of a puncher. He's a guy that all he needs is one shot. He's definitely one of those type of fighters. All he needs is one shot. And you definitely don't want to be playing games with those guys. I mean, you saw what happened when Mike Jones played around with Randall Bailey and didn't end too well for him. So I'm getting off into a tangent, though. Ricky Burns managed to successfully defend his WBA light welterweight title. Good on him for doing that, and I'm hoping that the fight with Broner gets made, because it's an interesting fight and another excellent fight to end the year should they manage to make it for December, because in spite of the fact that October is a little bit of a dry spot for boxing in general, it's looking like November and December might be able to make up for it in a lot of ways. It's just kind of unfortunate that a lot of these fights wind up taking place on like the same day as each other. So it's like you have a long drought without a whole hell of a lot of action, and then all of a sudden, like on, week after week or day after day, it's like all of a sudden there's all these big names and big fights and everything, and I think it kind of takes away somewhat from the star power, where if you just got a big victory, well, a lot of people aren't even necessarily talking about you because they're thinking about the next fight the next day or the next week, where there's going to be two more like 5-star fighters, two more pound for pound level fighters fighting against each other or what have you, just two more top 5 in a division type fighters facing off against each other. So that's one of the unfortunate issues when it comes to so many fights being all crammed together in the schedule. But it is what it is. So I'm definitely looking forward to it, and that's all for this one. So see you guys in the next one. Peace.